winner of Foodland's Tea Creek Farm, Tea Creek. Tea Creek is an Indigenous-led, culturally safe, land-based Indigenous food sovereignty initiative in Gitxsan territory.
OCM Siaya, thank you everyone for honoring us this evening. Hello, my name is Jacob Eaton. My name is also Japagotwinskik. I am Lachskik Eagle Clan, Tsimshan from Gakatla, Lachkolams, ancestors in Haida Gwaii and Bella Bella. I'm doing one better than thanking my wife. My wife's right here with me. You should always bring your wife with you.
Especially when she's co-owner.
Yes. So I'd like to use some of my time just to share a little bit of our perspectives on what we call Indigenous food sovereignty. I want to start by quoting one of our trainees, graduates from last year, and he said, "You need to start growing your vegetables yesterday, you know. Today is a good time to start, but yesterday was better." I wanted to start too with mentioning with a little bit of myth busting, and I actually cut a lot of this out of my notes because I was like, oh, I'm going to be talking to a bunch of white people who can't handle the truth. and then our opening speaker and subsequent speakers, I was like, heck, all right. I just might go for a little more this time. So. Yeah, I just wanted to start by saying that Indigenous people were agrarian, are agrarian. We see agriculture as encompassing so much more than colonial agriculture. It includes forests, fresh water, ocean water, everything interconnected and valuable and part of our food systems. We were not hunter-gatherers. We were farmers, what we now call farmers, in many different ways, whether it was clam gardens, whether it was the herring beds, whether it was, which my ancestors took care of, whether it was our forests that feed our farms with fresh water and predators that keep our pests down and valuable meat proteins for our families. That many are no longer agrarian is the result of hundreds of years of direct, intentional, genocidal actions. Some of these actions have included policies that you may not be aware of. I was not aware of this. I was not aware that Indigenous people of this part of the world are responsible for feeding a majority of the planet through over 10,000 years of intentional farming that has developed valuable crops such as potatoes, tomatoes, squash, over the 80% of the world's edible beans, as well as sunflowers and other valuable crops. Our government has, over many years and many, many generations, destroyed the ability of our people and removed us from our lands. That includes this severalty policy, which didn't allow Indigenous people to use technology or tractors, forbade them from farming with anything other than hand tools. The peasant policy, which forbade Indigenous people from farming more than 20 acres of land in this country. And the pass and permit system, which forbade Indigenous people from purchasing supplies from stores if they were to be used for farming. Those you would not get permission from your Indian agent, and you could not farm. So the fact that we are where we are today has absolutely nothing to do with the ability and interest of Indigenous people, but is the direct result of genocide. First Nations are still not legally allowed to own fee simple land off reserve. Access to land, along with funding, continues to be a top barrier for Indigenous nations and people. Indigenous food sovereignty, when implemented properly, meets 13 of the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Sorry. 80% of the planet's remaining biodiversity rests in Indigenous controlled lands, making returning control of land to Indigenous people a pillar of fighting climate change. The number of farmers and farms in Canada has been in steady decline. The latest Statistics Canada numbers are that farmers declined 10% in BC alone, in between the latest Stats Canada periods, censuses, thanks. While the age of primary producers continues to increase. The Indigenous population, on the other hand, is the fastest growing and youngest in the country and most likely to be entrepreneurial, 4 to 5 times more likely to choose entrepreneurships over non-Indigenous Canadians. Indigenous nations and people are also the most rural population in Canada by percentage. Rural and remote areas with food-producing capacity are already well populated by Indigenous people and have been since time immemorial. Coupling the return of lands to Indigenous people with investments in Indigenous food sovereignty will fight climate change, improve regional food security, and create local and regional economic resilience. The very recent and ongoing climate disasters in our part of the world should be a wake-up call, and now is the time for us to all work together to implement Indigenous food sovereignty-based solutions on a wide scale. Indigenous nations and people are ready to go, but urgently need big changes to implement food sovereignty and start making a positive difference for everyone. We are working hard at Tea Creek, but we need more support. Last year, we hosted over 1,200 Indigenous guests on our farm. We graduated 33 people, and we directly trained and interacted with 100 Indigenous trainees. We served over 6,000 hot meals, paid out over 15,000 hours in employment and wages to Indigenous people, which was our biggest expense. We grew 20,000 pounds of produce on our farm and gifted 100% of it back into our local Indigenous community. And we did all of it in the middle of a pandemic. So for more, please visit us on our website or Instagram or Facebook, or even better, in person. We're here tonight. And finally, I would really like to thank some of our supporters, our biggest supporters, and there's too many to list, so I just want to highlight a couple. First of all, our majority Indigenous staff. We have 80 to 90% Indigenous staff. We've hired back our graduates to teach, and our Indigenous leaders. We couldn't be here, we wouldn't be here without them, and unfortunately we couldn't bring them all with us because they're busy running Tea Creek, training people as I speak, Indigenous people. I'd like to thank the ITABC, the Industry Training Authority, who was our first backer, Ministry of Advanced Education and Skills Training, our biggest funder, and Janet's recording me right now from AEST, thank you. A special mention to Young Agrarians, Sarah Dent's here, and Darcy. They've been invaluable with their in-kind support. And of course, our participants. We wouldn't be there without our participants who sign up and show up in large numbers, more than we can handle. And to the many more, we thank you, we thank you, we thank you, we thank you. And we look forward to connecting, and we look forward to working together on Indigenous food sovereignty. Doyachsan, thank you. Thank you.
Woo! Jacob, standing ovation.
I'm not sure how you top that. I need to do the next one now.
That's amazing.
Thankfully, it's just me.